My parents always favored my brother, so when they chose his football game over my event, I didn't tell them it was actually my wedding, and now my family is in chaos. So I, 27F, have a younger brother, Mike, 21M. He is the definition of a man-child and a mama's boy, always complaining, always expecting others to bow to him. Just, overall, a terrible person. Ever since he was born, my parents fussed over him for everything. He's not special needs or had a traumatic birth or anything of the sort. He was just born. And my parents completely discarded me. My mom, 50F, especially. She went from a loving mother to one of those boy moms that people make fun of on the internet. My father, 50M, still showed me love and support, but he's always been too much of a coward to stand up to my mother and let me win at least once. The only one who stood for me was my grandpa, 76M, who always called my parents out on their crap, and never liked my brother. I remind him of his late wife, my grandma, and we have a very special bond, but he lives on the other side of the country and I could never see him often. Mike knows our mom prefers him, and loves to shove it in my face. Because of this and his behavior, we've always been at odds. He's spoiled, a brat and an awful human. I can't remember how many times I ended up in trouble for things I did better than him or for things he framed me with. His only talent are his football skills. He won a scholarship to a nice college out of state. My parents didn't spend a dime on my education because apparently my fund had been used to cover expenses after a fire, just for me to discover years later that said money were given to Mike to buy a car and a house. It's at public university that I met Lucas. He was the first person I was really drawn to there. Of course, I met new people who are now my dearest friends, and thanks to them and Lucas, who was my best friend for years before we got together, I managed to move out of my parents' house. Now both Lucas and I are well known in our fields and have very good salaries. Now, to the main issue. Lucas proposed to me a year ago. We're very private people, so we didn't post it on social media or anything, and when I told my parents they dismissed it with a "that's nice," I'm starting to think they downright didn't listen to me at all. We decided that we wanted a nice but simple ceremony and reception with our friends and relatives. Lucas convinced me to invite my parents and brother, but they never responded to the invite. And whenever I went to visit and began to talk about my wedding, without mentioning it was a wedding, my mom would always speak over me and about my brother's accomplishments and wild adventures. At one point I got fed up with it, and interrupted my mom to tell her that there was an event I was planning to organize, whose date was unmovable. She told me that they couldn't attend, because my brother was playing the last game of the season that very same day, and wanted them to be there. Of course, this favoritism didn't surprise me. They missed my ballets, shows, and both my high school and university graduation for things about him. At this point, I wanted to be petty. I told both my parents that it wasn't a problem to miss this event, purposely omitted the fact that this event was my wedding, and didn't insist further. Flash forward to a few weeks ago, I got married. It was perfect. My family, Lucas' family and our friends were all there, and we had a blast. My grandpa was happy to give me away, and it was just perfect. My relatives asked me multiple times why my parents weren't there with us. I was honest and simply said they had my brother's game to attend, and couldn't come. They gave me a few looks, and my grandpa was visibly angry for a while, but otherwise nothing strange happened. After the reception, Lucas and I left for our honeymoon, and were phone-free for the whole duration of the trip. But once we got back, we discovered that a wild storm was welcoming us home. I turned my phone on, and was unable to even unlock it before a storm of notifications popped up. Most of them were from my mother and brother. Mike called me all sorts of nasty names and insulted me because, apparently, one of my paternal aunts posted the photos of the wedding on Facebook, and captioned it with a very obvious dig at my parents, especially my mom, for missing the wedding. The post apparently went viral in my parents' community, and they've been publicly shamed for their mistreatment of me. It also turns out that my grandpa personally visited my parents to go on a tirade to shame my father, his son, to the point of tears. And this seemed to be my father's breaking point, because he was so distraught for missing his only daughter's wedding and for his father's disapproval, that he finally rebelled against my mom and is threatening divorce unless she makes it up to me. I think that's the reason why my mom has been spamming my phone with messages, at first insulting and threatening and then downright pitiful, full of begging and pity parties. Now I'm at home with my husband, deciding how to approach the situation. Most of my relatives, even those I didn't invite to the wedding, reached out to apologize for what I went through and to claim they had no idea this was happening at home. Can't blame any of my relatives, they all live with my grandpa on the other side of the country or in another state, but my mom's sisters and friends are belittling me for not telling my mom about the wedding, because now she's inconsolable at the thought of having missed my wedding. Personally, I think she just claims that to save face, but I'm not sure. The latest messages from my father and mother seem extremely saddened and hurt for missing my wedding. Now my family is divided on 3 fronts, the majority who is sticking by my side, my maternal aunts shaming me for hurting my mom's feelings, and my maternal grandparents who are adamant that I forgive my mom in light of her atonement. My best friends are telling me not to listen to them. Am I wrong here?
I deliberately delayed divorcing my cheating wife until our prenup expired to protect my assets and kids, but she's shocked by my abrupt filing. My wife settled for me. I didn't know it when I married her, but I do now. She was in love with her high school boyfriend that her parents hated. She was with him all through university. Her parents finally told her that they would cut her off financially if she stayed with him. We met soon afterwards and I fell in love. She did not. Once again, this was a surprise to me. We had a prenup that her parents insisted on. I was in it for the long haul, so I had no problem with it. I basically got nothing if we divorced before we were married 10 years. After that, it was an even split as long as I was not the cause. She was banging her old boyfriend our entire marriage. I found out after we were married for 8 years. I was angry and depressed. I had spent 8 years supporting her in her career. She has a much better paying job than I do. It is high profile and she deals with our government a lot. I decided that I could handle 2 years of infidelity. I had already done 8 unknowingly. I filed for divorce on the day after our 10th anniversary. I let her parents pay for our vacation. I didn't do anything dirty like send the evidence I had to her parents. I just had a lawyer draft claim for divorce. Included was the evidence that the prenup had lapsed and our holdings were to be split. She said that I blindsided her after our holiday away. She doesn't understand why I would do it. I said that I just don't think we are compatible anymore. I am prepared to go nuclear if I have to. But I don't want our kids. Yes, they are mine. I checked, knowing why. I am keeping the evidence I have on her boyfriend in my pocket. I can blow up his marriage and make her parents pissed at her if I absolutely must. I just prefer to end things with me in a decent financial position to take care of the kids. Am I the a-hole for what I did?
My parents forbade me from moving out, and I soon discovered they had secretly racked up massive debt in my name, so I turned them into the cops. My parents took out credit cards and loans in my name. It was fine when they were paying the bills, but they got behind. I don't have a key to the mailbox, so I never saw the bills or anything. I just finished my 3rd year of university and I was going to move out. That would require me to get a credit check and stuff. My parents freaked out and completely forbid me from moving out. They said it was stupid that I would waste money on moving out when I could save money living at home. They don't like my boyfriend, so I thought that was their issue. But boy, was I wrong. Long story short, I am about $60,000 in debt because of them. I cannot afford to pay that off. I told them that they needed to clear the debt immediately and change the house rules so my boyfriend could spend the night. They said that they didn't have the money to pay the debt and that I could not strong-arm them into changing the rules of their house. I called my aunt and asked her if I could please come stay with her for a bit. She let me and asked a lot of questions. Then she showed me a dozen Reddit posts about parents screwing up their kids' future and kids allowing it. I went to the police and reported it. My parents got arrested and charged. They are furious with me. I know they didn't spend the money on me. I do not know what they spent it on. I don't care. I feel bad for them, but I'm not letting them screw up my future. Am I wrong for what I did? My friend tried to weasel her way into my marriage by suggesting an open relationship, and when I refused, she turned our entire social circle against me. I, 30F, have been married to my husband, 32M, for 5 years. We have 2 beautiful kids, 5M and 6F, and have a very strong relationship, and are happy together. Recently, my friend Lisa, 29F, confided in me that she has developed feelings for my husband. She said that she finds him attractive and admires our relationship, and she asked if we would consider having an open relationship so she could be with him too. I was shocked and told her no, explaining that my husband and I are committed to each other and that we are not interested in an open relationship. Lisa got upset and accused me of being selfish and closed-minded. She argued that modern relationships should be flexible and that I was denying her happiness. Since then, Lisa has been distant and has been spreading rumors in our friend group, suggesting that I am overly possessive and controlling. This has caused a lot of tension, and some of our mutual friends are now taking sides. My husband is supportive of my decision, but I feel guilty for the drama it has caused. So, am I wrong for rejecting my friend's request to have an open relationship with my husband? Update 1. After reading some of your comments, I decided to bring the group out for coffee and I told them all about what Lisa said and the real story. I also showed them this post. After showing them, there were 2 girls that were still on Lisa's side, so I took some advice from the comments and said to them, let Lisa screw with your husband, then you can be on her side. After that, everyone was on my side thankfully. Lisa wasn't happy at all and she started ranting about how it wasn't fair that she just wanted to experiment something new and it wasn't even that bad of a request, and how I'm making it such a big deal. Which I didn't understand. Me and the rest of the group have officially cut contact with Lisa. Just hoping she doesn't try to reach out. We'll update if something happens. Also, just clarifying that Lisa also asked my husband for an open marriage personally. He also rejected, saying that even if he was down, he would never want to go out with her. I'm thinking of cutting off the ladies that were on Lisa's side for so long. But I'm not sure if they heard a different story or not. My husband's habit of sitting in the car for 10 minutes before entering our house put my son's health at risk, so I'm filing for divorce, and now his family is calling me heartless. I have been married to my husband for 2 years. He has a habit of sitting in the car 5 to 10 minutes before entering the house. I don't know why he does it, but he talked about a past traumatic experience he had when he came home and caught his ex cheating on him. Because of that, he'd just spend a few minutes in his car before he enters his home as response to his trauma. Now, I won't say that he's wrong in coping with what happened, but this has made me feel uneasy and it had caused many fights between us. Like when we have guests, he'd sit outside before coming in, or when dinner is waiting on him and he'd take 10 minutes silently sitting in the car. I was worried that something might come up and he does not respond properly. And it happened last week. My 8-year-old son tripped and fell from the stairs and broke his ankle. He was in so much pain and I called my husband to come take him to the hospital and he rushed out of work, but then I called and then I was stunned when I looked out the window and I saw him sitting outside the house in his car. I was both shocked and angry. I ran outside and I asked how long he was sitting in the car. He told me around 8 minutes. I asked why he didn't come into the house immediately to help and he said he would after 2 more minutes. I was so mad and hurt but tried to rush him and he insisted he wouldn't feel comfortable coming in until the 10 minutes were up. He told me to get my son ready to take him to the hospital, but I started screaming at him nonstop telling him this was a family emergency and that he was out of his mind to behave like that. It might not have been my best response but I was shocked by his behavior and quite concerned because I had this situation always stuck in the back of mind, thinking what my husband do when there's a family emergency. I ended up taking my son by myself when my neighbor intervened and offered to take us. We went to the hospital and later, my husband came and tried to talk to me but I refused. I then went to stay with my mom and texted him that I wanted a divorce. He tried to rationalize and justify what he's done, saying he could not help it and that he was nervous and wanted to help my son but felt stuck. I refused to reply to his messages and days later, his family literally berated me saying I was making my husband's trauma more severe and that I disrespected his boundaries by pushing him off his limits. I feel lost and unable to think because of the whole ordeal. My family are siding with me on this but they can be biased sometimes. My husband is still trying to basically talk me out of divorce, saying I'm making a huge deal out of it. I feel like I no longer have trust in him especially when it comes to serious stuff such as how cold he acted in a family emergency. Edit to clarify that my son isn't his biological son. We don't have kids together.
My lying wife had a multiple-year-long affair and the lawyer told me I would lose everything if I divorced her. So I spent years perfecting my payback. My revenge began by discovering my wife Carrie's infidelity after 14 years of marriage and 3 kids. I saw a text appear on her work phone for just a few seconds that would forever change my life. It was a message that was sexually graphic and had no business being on anyone's work phone. It was on the lock screen and the sender's name, Perry, was visible. The world stopped around me. I just froze. My first thoughts were, what the hell was that about? It's her work phone. That kind of message gets people fired. Then it hit me. Was Carrie having an affair? It's amazing how the brain works. I suddenly started remembering a lot of things Carrie had done that seemed odd but I'd either dismissed them myself or immediately accepted her explanation. She was always walking out of the room to answer a call or return a text and claimed that it would violate HIPAA. She was a nurse, if I overheard her talking about a patient. I accepted this because education has similar privacy laws regarding students. I'm a district school admin. She would sometimes come home with the faint smell of cologne on her clothes and claimed it was from helping to move male patients. Again, I accepted this at face value, but it always struck me as odd how it seemed to have the same scent of cologne. Once the proverbial barn door was open, I started seeing a lot of things that I'd missed before. Our love life in the bedroom had cooled off considerably, which wasn't helped by her having to leave the house at odd hours to fill in for other nurses that called in sick. I also recalled where I'd seen the name Perry before and a call to the hospital confirmed he was a doctor there. For the next week or so, I was walking around in daze trying to put all of the pieces together. One of our kids had left a book in Carrie's car, so it was an excuse to visit the hospital. My kid went up to get Carrie's car key. I talked to a nurse in the lobby and joked about how work phones seem like a blessing but all they do is put you on call 24 hours a day. This led to her eventually telling me that the hospital was too cheap to give cell phones to nurses, so only high-level executives got them, which didn't include Carrie. With pretty much everything confirmed, I took some personal time off the next day to talk to a divorce lawyer. The news she gave me was horrible. We lived in a community property state with no-fault divorce. I made more money than Carrie, she'd been the primary caretaker of the kids, and we'd been married for more than 10 years. Basically, if I filed for divorce, I'd be screwed. Lose the house, pay alimony, she'd get a huge chunk of my retirement, and I'd pay child support for the next decade unless I was lucky enough to be awarded joint custody. The worst thing she told me was that it didn't matter that she cheated. It didn't matter. I was crushed. There was only one person I could trust with this kind of information. She was a fellow teacher that had also made the jump to administration, but was stuck at a school site. Let's call her Anne. Anne had been married at 19, but her marriage was annulled when her husband got some other woman pregnant. Since then, she'd focused on her career and we'd found we were kindred spirits in a lot of ways regarding K-12 education. I talked to Anne. She said something to me that changed my whole mindset. If you don't like the hand you're dealt, change the deck. I realized I had 2 problems. I made more money than Carrie and she had more time than me to be the primary caretaker of the kids. The second issue was actually kind of easy. At every district office, there are jobs that are fast tracks to higher positions and there are jobs that administrators suffer through. One of these dead-end regulatory positions was open again. I sat down with our district superintendent and asked about being transferred to that position. At first he was shocked, but I told him that it was my time to take one for the team and it would fill a hole in my admin experience. He agreed. It was really just crunching numbers with no personnel or student interaction so I could set my schedule, even take a laptop home and work there. With my new free time, I began taking the kids to school, picking them up from school, and taking them home. I'd help them with their homework, make dinner, etc. while the end goal was to become their primary caretaker. I can't explain how much I really enjoyed taking a more active role in their day-to-day lives. My salary hadn't been reduced, so I needed to find a way for Carrie to make a lot more money than she was in current nursing position. I remembered Carrie being mad that her supervisor told her in the future, bachelor degrees will be worthless and everyone will need at least a master's degree. Carrie had worked hard to get her bachelor's and that supervisor's comment peed all over her hard work. I talked her into starting a master's program. I told her that since I had a much more flexible work schedule, I would keep taking care of the kids. She was reluctant at first, then I said, "You could have every evening free to study or go to class, whatever you want to do." I saw her eyes immediately light up, probably thinking that she could spend more time with Perry. To make sure she was actually completing her master's courses, I paid her tuition and fees directly to her university. It was going to take her between 2 and 3 years to finish. Those years were rough at times. I could tell every time she was rushing off or coming back from seeing Perry. There was an excitement or sense of satisfaction in her eyes that just wasn't there when she was doing her coursework. I had to either smile or pretend I didn't notice. My temper got short at times and I found myself in arguments over petty nonsense. A couple of times I almost blew the whole charade, having to bite my tongue and apologize rather than scream insults at her that she deserved. Anne remained my confidant through all of this. I'd recommended her for my previous fast-track position and she joined me at the district office. Anne was qualified, hard-working, ambitious, and only needed her foot in the door to impress the higher-ups. I even got a few pats on the back for recommending her after she impressed everyone. Anne and I started our own affair. It wasn't some hot-blooded, passionate romance, but two friends giving each other what they need. Without Anne, I wouldn't have been able to maintain the charade of being the oblivious cuckold. But when Carrie would come home smiling after spending time with Perry, I was able to bear it, smiling back because I had my own lover. After 3.5 years, Carrie completed her master's and was promoted at her hospital. Her salary went up substantially and was now higher than mine. When the kids and I made her a congratulations dinner, I made a joke about her being the breadwinner for the family and she laughed, joking back I should be a stay-at-home dad now. A month later, I went back to the lawyer and told her the financial situation had drastically changed. With these new facts, she drafted the petition and filed it. When the kids were with my mother, I had Carrie served. The deputy knocked on our front door and I let him in, pointing at my wife. He asked her name and then handed her a copy of the divorce petition. With the deputy standing there, I told Carrie I knew all about her affair with Perry. I told her to go be happy with her Dr. Lover. She screamed at me, tried to lie, and then made the mistake of rushing toward me. The deputy stopped her and warned her that women go to jail for domestic violence too. He suggested she pack a bag to stay somewhere else. Carrie left after I promised not to tell the kids about her affair. I didn't tell the kids. But I told my mother, who told my sister, who told her kids, who told their cousins, my kids. It took a few days, but eventually the kids knew that Dad was divorcing Mom because she had a boyfriend. In the end, the court granted the divorce, giving me primary custody of our kids. Because I was already their primary caretaker, I kept the house with the promise I'd refinance to buy out Carrie's half. She was ordered to pay child support, and I used that fact to negotiate with her to give up any rights to my retirement if I bought her out. I was able to refinance my home, and with a little money borrowed from my parents, I bought our Carrie's community property interest in the home and in my retirement. The day she signed all the paperwork with my lawyer finally ending any possible financial obligations to her was the happiest I'd been. I felt like I could finally breathe. I celebrated with Anne, who'd been my rock through all of it. I'm not ashamed to say that through the years I'd cried many times in her arms. Anne and I would eventually marry. She got promoted to a higher position and I was convinced to take back my previous position at the district when my youngest child reached high school. Carrie and I got along well after the divorce. We took the kids to family therapy and worked out this co-parenting thing. For a few months, she took a beating from the kids about why she needed a boyfriend when Daddy was there all along. Between the kids and the therapist raking her over the coals, I didn't have to say anything at all. Carrie missed a lot of time with the kids because of her now legitimately busy work schedule, and I actually felt bad that my kids were missing time with their mother, so encouraged them to talk to her on the phone instead. When Carrie found out that I'd proposed to Anne, she congratulated me. I told her it's okay for her to marry Perry too. She got sad. She told me that Perry had started seeing another woman, a younger nurse at the hospital, because with her new position, she didn't have time for him, and when they did get together, she wasn't fun anymore. My ex-wife, the woman who'd cheated on me and destroyed our marriage, was looking to me for sympathy. I had none to give. What I had was years of anger and frustration. Years of knowing some other man was sleeping with my wife. I'd lost weight from not being able to eat, I'd suffered hypertension and had to confide in my doctor why it wasn't the stress of my job. I had to listen to my dentist complain about how I was grinding and listening to him tell me I'd need dental implants if it kept up. There were times when I had to be intimate with Carrie to keep up the charade, only to lie that I wanted to use rubbers to remind us how we used to have intimacy when we were dating, or because I might have a bladder infection, then go take a test anyway and wait for the results before seeing Anne again. But in the end, it was all worth it.
My husband went ultra poor trying to copy my lifestyle and impress his kids. Now he can't afford to live and says it's my fault, so I need to save him. My husband, John, 53M, and I, 44F, have always kept our finances separate, and although we refer to each other as husband and wife, and also had a wedding, we are not legally married. This was primarily for inheritance purposes because we each have older children from previous relationships. For a while now, John has been getting angrier over little things and generally becoming moody and distant. I finally had enough and approached him about separation, and this conversation led to a big blowout, with him revealing the state of his finances. Basically, John revealed that he had basically no savings left. All the money he had saved for retirement and his kids' schooling was gone. Furthermore, he said it was all my fault since he used up all his savings trying to keep up with my lifestyle. There were never any crazy bills or anything like that, and we always split everything equally. The house we live in, I own outright, so there wasn't a mortgage payment. However, I have always liked to travel a lot on fairly extravagant vacations. I would invite John or John and his children to join on trips, but never made them feel like they had to come. That said, he was expected to pay for himself and for his kids. Except recently, he accepted every invitation. I would also give my kids things he considered extravagant, but I considered normal, so he felt like he had to give similar things to his own kids. John said with all the spending to keep up, his savings dwindled very fast. I expressed that I couldn't understand how or why he would spend all he had when he knew he couldn't afford it. He said it was like keeping up with the Joneses, only worse because it was at home so he couldn't block it out. John thinks since I knew his job, I should have had a basic understanding of his finances and realized this wasn't the lifestyle he could maintain. That the kind thing would have been to offer to pay for the trips and other things instead of dangling them in front of his and his kids' faces. Looking back, I probably could have realized that this spending didn't make sense for his salary, but I wasn't thinking about it. I don't think it was my responsibility to keep his finances in mind here. We had agreed from the beginning to keep our finances separate, so to me, that means paying for things separately. Is this really my fault? Update 1. After reading all the comments on my first post 3 weeks ago, I realized I needed more time to think about things. I also thought that given the situation, it would be best for us to spend the holidays apart to avoid any controversy. He wasn't a fan of the idea, but I eventually got him to agree to it. Last week, things settled down, so we met up to have a more detailed discussion about the state of his finances. A few more things were revealed. I found out that he had lost his job earlier this year and didn't tell me. He got a new job in October, but he went over 4 months without one while pretending he still had a job. During that time, he only received a small amount of money from unemployment, so he started putting everything on his credit cards. His new job doesn't pay as much as his old one, so he hasn't been able to pay more than the minimum towards his debts, which are now substantial. I feel like if he had just brought up all these issues earlier, this could have been avoided, or we could have worked something out. Now, I really just feel like I can't trust him. I can't trust him with money, and I can't trust him not to hide things from me. I just can't see going back and trying to make things work with him at this point. Since he doesn't have a place to take all their things, I've agreed to store their stuff in my garage until he gets more settled, which means I won't be able to make as clean of a break as I would like right now. But for the most part, it's over. Update 2. I like the suggestion I was given when I last posted 2 months ago, of paying for a storage unit for their things for a few months. However, my ex did not agree to it. He said it would make things too difficult because the closest storage location was too far out of the way. It definitely felt like he was still trying to cling to things. Since I couldn't get a storage unit in his name without his approval, I talked to a friend who was a lawyer about the situation. He helped me write up a notice that told him he had 30 days notice to retrieve their things, or they would be disposed of. After the 30-day notice was up, he still had only picked up a few things. I ended up calling his ex and asked her if she or their kids wanted anything before I got rid of it all. Well, they had been left in the complete dark about our relationship being over. My ex had been lying to them, saying I was sick, and then he was sick with COVID, and that's why they hadn't been able to come over. I was not at all surprised at this point. I figured she didn't know about the rest of it either, and to LD her, she is livid, especially about the money for their kids' education since it was part of their divorce agreement. Anyway, the kids all got what they wanted, and I had a charity come and pick up the rest. It feels a lot better now that there is a completely clean break. Yes, I have gotten the locks changed and blocked his number, since there is no reason for me to have contact with him anymore. This is probably the last time I'll be posting. I think in the future, I will probably look for more transparency when it comes to finances in any serious relationship. With how much he was lying, I can only imagine what else he may have been lying about. Had I known more, I don't think he would have been able to hide things. I am just so grateful and relieved that I was able to protect myself and my children. Update 3. I know I said that would be my last update. It's not really necessary for me to make another, but now I'm kind of using this as a form of journaling, which I've found cathartic. I only had one run-in with my ex since the last incident. He came to my house. I only spoke to him through the camera, and he asked about getting his things. I told him that I had already gotten rid of everything as I had warned him, but that his kids had taken some things. I also told him he needed to leave and not come back. Surprisingly, he didn't make a big fuss about it. He just said okay and that he was sorry for bothering me before he left, but he did look very tired, so maybe that's why. I have not seen him since, and apparently his ex and his kids haven't heard from him in all this time either. This update had more to do with them than my ex. Actually, his ex contacted me to ask about him. She wanted to know if I had heard from him or had his new contact information. His phone is apparently no longer in service. I told her how I hadn't had any contact with him since the aforementioned visit. She also asked if she and I could meet up for coffee and talk. I declined because honestly, I couldn't think of a reason for us to meet up, though I did offer to pass on any info about him if I heard anything. She apparently wanted to talk to me about helping her pay for her eldest child's, who is now a senior in high school, education next year. She also subtly implied there was some fault on my part for their lack of funds. I rather cowardly told her I would think about it and ended the call. To be honest, I feel like it's an unfair position she's putting me in. The main reason being that her children don't seem to care for me. We got along all right while I was with their dad. However, since I ended things with him, it has been complete silence from them. I did try to reach out to them to see if they were okay, and they never responded. Even when they came over to get their things, they ignored me and my youngest. However, I Did get a message after the call with their mom about how she missed me. The timing though just makes it seem sort of like manipulation to get money out of me. Since then, I have blocked all of them.
I caught my wife sending revealing pics of herself to my brother-in-law behind my back. Now she's begging me not to send her to the streets because they haven't done anything in the sheets. My wife, Jessica, 34F, and I, 35M, have been together for 5 years, married for 3, and we have a 2-year-old daughter together. Jessica has 2 sisters, and the eldest one, 38F, is married to Jake, 40M. A week ago, I came home from work early and wanted to scare Jessica. I tried to be sneaky, but somehow I slipped and accidentally hurt my back. Jessica came to my rescue. I went to the bedroom, and she went to the kitchen to get an ice pack. Her phone was by the bed, and a WhatsApp notification came from Jake saying, "You've got the best pair I've ever seen." I immediately knew what was happening. I unlocked the phone and saw that she had just sent some pictures and a video of her exposed chest to Jake, and there were no previous chats before that. When Jessica came back to the room, I showed her the chat and asked, "How long?" I have known this woman for 10 years, and I have never seen her so mortified. Her eyes got teary, and she said, "Honey, I am so sorry, but I can explain." So I said, "Go on." According to her, at the end of 2019, she was struggling with money, and Jake suggested he would help her out. He hinted that he would like to see her pics. I feel like vomiting having to write this out. So she did send him pics, and it continued over the years. She swears there was nothing emotional or physical involved. It was purely transactional. I didn't believe any of it, but she showed me on Venmo that Jake paid her $300 yesterday. I then told her, "It's been 5 years. Try to remember if anything physical happened." For me, if even half of what she is saying is true, how could something like that not become physical? She started crying and told me she could prove it tomorrow because Jake would get suspicious if she tried to talk to him now. I took her phone, went to a bar, got wasted for the night, and when I came back, she was still there crying. I just slept on the couch. The next morning, I gave her the phone, and she called Jake. The conversation went something like this. "Hey, I was wondering if you want some more pics? I'm short on money. Yesterday was all I had. We can do something more this time and meet in person. I've changed my mind on that." "No way. How much are we talking about?" I felt like I was going to puke. I told her that we are done and left for the office. I am not a very wealthy dude, but I would consider myself a stable guy who could take care of his family. Now I just feel like I have failed as a man whose wife had to sell her body to meet her expected lifestyle. When I got home that night, she looked like crap. I asked Jessica why she kept taking money from him after we got married and why she didn't ask me while we were dating. She said she didn't know how to stop and that it was easy money. I left my home that night and told her she can keep the home and the car, but I want 50-50 custody of my child. So here I am now. Haven't told anyone about this. It's been a week since I've been staying in a hotel. I go home in the evening to play with my daughter. I'm speaking with divorce lawyers, and Jessica is constantly talking about marriage counseling. Update 1. Before getting to the update, some people were asking me to get a paternity test. I don't need one. I know she is my daughter because I'm Indian, and Jessica is white, and my daughter looks like me. Now for the update. After I made that post, I shared my situation with my cousin's sister, 30F. She is the only family member I have living in the States. I visited her place the next day, and she knocked some sense into me. I realized part of me still didn't want a divorce because I basically married Jessica against my parents' will. Originally, they wanted me to have an arranged marriage, so my failed marriage would hurt my ego. She also arranged a meeting with a divorce lawyer, and no, I am not giving up my house. I was just emotional at that time. From what I understand, in our state, adultery has pretty much zero impact on the assets, so it will likely be a 50-50 split. However, there is a high chance I can get better custody of my daughter because I have a job, and Jessica doesn't. You could also say she is also involved in intimacy work at this point, which could work in my favor. My father-in-law called me last evening, and he was crying. He told me he didn't know what to say to me and that if he were in my place, he would have left her. Apparently, Jessica got scared and told her family everything after I didn't visit home for 2 days and it blocked her everywhere. I guess I should have done that a little while ago, and Jake is out of his house also. So, I think I will go for a divorce because there is no point of reconciliation at this point when the whole relationship seems fake to me. Update 2. Before getting to the update, some people were cursing me in my DMs, saying I might not earn enough and accusing me of financially abusing my wife and taking advantage of her. I don't think this is the case for me. My salary is close to mid-6 figures, and we have a joint account where I put half of my in-hand salary, and we don't even spend that much. Now to the update. After the day Jessica told everyone about the situation, my mother-in-law called and wanted to talk. She was with Jessica after the whole thing happened. I returned to my home later that evening, and her parents and her sister Josie, Jake's wife, were there. After I got there, Jessica wanted to talk alone. According to her, Jake had been trying to pursue her since she was about 16 to 17. For context, Jake and Josie have been together for 20 years now. This continued for almost 2 years. He used to make suggestive comments about her body, and she told Josie about it. But Josie didn't believe Jessica at that time and told her she was doing this for attention. Jessica didn't tell her parents either because, according to her, Josie was their parents' favorite, so nobody would have believed her. Jake didn't do anything between those years besides casual flirting until 2019 when Jessica was having problems with rent and the whole transactional thing happened. I asked why she didn't ask me about it, and she said we were only 1 month into dating and it could have looked bad. She swears nothing happened after that until last year when Jake and Josie started having problems in their marriage, and he started messaging Jessica again. She didn't entertain him at first, but she had gained some weight from pregnancy and thought I was ignoring her because of it, which I was not. At that time, I was working close to 13 to 14 hours a day to change my niche to another tech stack. Massive layoffs were also going on, so it was a pretty bad time. Now she admitted that she liked the attention and validation this time, but she didn't have any feelings towards him. They started exchanging pics and money, and this happened 3 times. Then she admitted it was cheating, although there were no emotional or physical actions from her side. but she said that she shouldn't have done it. I asked her why she didn't tell me about Jake harassing her when we first met or started dating. She said she thought I wouldn't have believed her and that it was in the past. Then I asked why she didn't tell me the first time I found out about this. Her answer was the same. She believed I wouldn't have believed her because nobody else knew about this. I was just sad about the fact that she doesn't trust me enough to tell me such a horrific incident. Now, I did something I am not very proud of. I asked her about a paternity test. I know it was stupid, but emotionally I was in a weird place at that moment. She was totally emotionless throughout the whole conversation, but after hearing about the test, she broke down crying and started hyperventilating. I started crying too. After about 10 minutes or so, we stopped crying, and she said okay, then asked me if we are getting a divorce. I said I don't know. She then said we should get a postnup before I do something like that. That line felt like a tight slap to my face. I was like, you're not even gonna convince me not to go through with it? Then she left with her parents. The next day, she called crying, asking not to get a divorce and to start marriage counseling. Honestly, I still care about her, and I said okay. So here we are now after some weird couple of days, still getting the postnup. Her individual counseling starts next week, and our marriage counseling starts next month. Hopefully, trust will return someday. Also, Jake is denying all that. According to him, Jessica seduced him for money, and my sister-in-law is getting a divorce. I know some people are gonna call me a doormat, but I don't care.
Fiancé intoxicated calls me and says he no longer wants to get married. I tried to compromise, but it didn't work. Plus updates. I'm engaged to my fiancé. We've been dating for 2 years before getting engaged. We have a fairly happy relationship and generally don't have any major disagreements or fights except for the one I'm about to mention. We want to become homeowners before getting married, so we've been viewing properties to purchase. Both of us have always been on the same page about wanting a small cozy house instead of a massive one. For the most part, we've never had any disagreements about our dream home. A couple of nights ago, I saw him going through 2-bedroom apartments listed online and asked him to look for 3-bedroom apartments instead. He laughed and asked me if I had changed my mind about wanting one child and wanted 2 instead. I told him that I'd like it if we had a spare bedroom for when we needed space or just wanted to spend a night or two apart from each other. Upon hearing this, he got super offended and asked me why I was suddenly being negative about our relationship. I told him that I wasn't being negative, and that I was being practical. People can be madly in love and still need some time away from each other even if nothing is wrong between them. He was extremely taken aback by this and said I was being unreasonable and made no sense. He started giving me the example of his parents who share an extremely happy relationship and how they never needed a separate room. I reminded him that we had a conversation regarding this 1 year into our relationship, and that I told him in an elaborate conversation that I liked the idea of having separate rooms. He flat out said that he didn't remember having that conversation with me. According to him, I already am being too weird about sharing space with him by not sharing the same washroom as him. For context, we don't live together, so, when I'm spending the night at his place, I use a spare washroom in his apartment since I don't like the idea of sharing a washroom with anyone. This kind of pissed me off because before this he never complained about me not wanting to share the washroom. In fact, he even said on several occasions how he found it extremely silly but cute. So, him bringing it up now and complaining about it felt very off. A spare room is something he's absolutely not comfortable with, and now he's wondering if there's a crack in our relationship. I just find the idea of a spare room healthy, and I think that 2 people who love and trust each other shouldn't feel insecure about something as trivial as an extra room. My fiancé has been giving me the cold shoulder ever since. Our families now know about this demand of mine, and think I'm being an a-hole for asking something like this off of him. I'm starting to feel extremely horrible and stressed out about this situation. Update 1. Our wedding is supposed to be in 4 months, but now I'm not sure if it'll be happening anymore. A little over a week ago, we had a heated argument over a disagreement regarding our future home. I wanted a spare room for when either of us needed space, and he was not at all okay with that idea. We went back and forth about why I wanted the spare room, and what my reasoning behind it was. Despite my attempt to explain my perspective, that the reason for the room was not to create a barrier between us, but rather to have a healthy space. We just couldn't see eye to eye about it. The disagreement turned into an argument, which then resulted in him bringing up issues he's had with me in the past. I tried to de-escalate the situation but failed horribly. Ever since the fight, he started giving me the cold shoulder. I've been trying to make amends ever since, because all of this is so silly. It's such a stupid reason to have such a massive fight over. This is very unlike us. 2 days ago, I texted him to ask him if we could have dinner together. I was so exhausted of this entire ordeal that I thought screw it. Screw the spare room. I love him more than my space, and I know he feels the same about me. Even though I was really adamant about wanting the room, I can let it go for the sake of our relationship. So, I decided to let him know I had changed my mind about it and apologize for all the drama it caused. But somehow, we had a fight again, and he walked out on me mid-dinner. He hasn't been home since then. I think I messed up. I'm sitting alone in his apartment, after receiving a call from him where he was bawling his eyes out and speaking incoherently for the most part, telling me that he loves me, but he doesn't want to marry me anymore. He's not responding to my calls anymore, and I don't know what I should do. I'm panicking and shaking. We've never had such fights, so I don't know how and why it ended up getting so bad. I don't know why this is happening right now. I don't know how to clean up this mess that I've made. I don't know what I can say or do to change what's happening. I'm scared, sad, and I can't help but hate myself right now. Update 2. A couple of hours after receiving the call from my now ex-fiancé, I tried to get in touch with his family, hoping they could act as a mediator between my ex and I. To my surprise, they were extremely reluctant to intervene, and told me that this is something he and I need to resolve on our own. The reason this is surprising to me is because our families have always been overly involved in our lives. That's just how parents and families are in our culture. My ex and I had to time and again remind them of our boundaries, which they gladly crossed despite our repeated conversations about it. So, you can imagine my shock when they said they'd rather stay out of something this huge. My family have been there for me through this and are quite furious yet heartbroken about the whole thing, especially regarding my ex's family's refusal to talk to my ex about the situation. After my conversation with my ex's parents, I sort of shut myself in. My friends visited me a couple of times to make sure I was doing okay, but apart from that I didn't really speak to anyone. These last couple of days have been extremely difficult. I went through a whirlpool of emotions to the point where I felt nothing at all. At the end of it all, I had made up my mind about my future with my ex. Yesterday, I got a call from my ex. Calls, to be precise. He wanted to meet. He made the conversation sound more like, okay, you've been wanting to talk to me, so let's meet and talk. Which I found odd because after my conversation with his parents, I didn't try to get in touch with any of them again. So, it's not like I was constantly trying to get in touch with him. We met, spoke a bit, it was mainly just small talk. I didn't ask him where he was all these days, even though it seemed like he wanted me to ask. I initiated the discussion about us, and he said I think we can agree that these past few days have been stressful for both of us. Let's move past it. I was so amazed by this cold response. It sounded like I was speaking to HR. How exactly were we both going through the same level of stress when he just made the decision, intoxicated, called me and told me he had made up his mind, and then disappeared on me without any further discussion? It honestly just made me lose faith in him. When I sat and thought about the night I received his call, and how it made me feel, I couldn't help but wonder what it'd be like if he acted like this over every trivial disagreement after we got married. I told him I had taken my time to think things through, and that I didn't see us working. I gave him his ring, and walked out before he had the chance to say anything to me. Anyone want to guess what happened next? Well, I started getting calls from his mom. I didn't answer them. I've been receiving nonstop texts from my ex since then. A couple of hours ago my mom called me to let me know that my ex's mom called her to talk about what's going on. My mom, God bless her, told his mom I think it's best we let them deal with this on their own. There's so much I'm going to have to go through after this, from telling people that my engagement broke to answering their several inquisitive questions to the process of requesting a refund of the deposits. As dramatic as it sounds, every morning when I wake up, I feel a knot in my stomach, my heart feels heavy, and my throat feels like there's something stuck in there. The fact that the entire trajectory of my life has changed is absolutely terrifying. At the beginning of this month, I had my life planned out for the next 3 years. Now I have no plans. I'm not sure what my next week is going to be like. It's scary. My mom said, don't think that you don't have any plans. Think that you have plenty of room to make new ones. I loved what she said, but it'll take me a little while before I can see it that way. I'm happy with the decision I've made, but it's going to take some getting used to. Future mother-in-law called me stupid and now I'm considering calling off the wedding. How do I approach the situation? Plus update. I'm engaged to John. We have been together for 5 years. We want to get married in July 2025. I always thought that his family liked me because we get along well. He has 2 older brothers, both married. Honestly, I was very excited to have them all as my in-laws. They were always kind to me. Some kind of important information. About a year ago when I was scrolling on Instagram, I saw a profile that was kind of cringy but in a cute way. It was an older woman's profile who shared inspirational quotes. I remember one particular post, and it was something in the lines of only stupid people pretend to know everything. Don't pretend. Just ask. Honestly, this quote changed me in a lot of ways. Before that, I was always worried that I might embarrass myself if I didn't know something, and after reading that quote, I realized that if I always pretend that I know everything, then I'll miss out on actually getting to learn about things. So, I decided to change my habits and start admitting that sometimes I genuinely don't know. Someone is talking about the war in Kosovo? Okay, sure, but first let me ask some questions so I can really understand what we're talking about. And I ask a lot of questions sometimes. I sometimes even open the Notes app and write in some questions that I later want to find answers to. Now on to the problem. His parents hosted a small barbecue last weekend only for the family. So, it was the mom, dad, brothers and their wives. I was the last person who showed up because I had to work late. I entered the house, and when I was walking towards the back of the house into the backyard, I heard John's mom talking about me. To be honest, she wasn't talking about me, more like mocking me. I heard her say in a high-pitched voice, "How does the sun work? Where should I put the fork? Why does nobody like me? How do I wipe my ass?" I just stood there. I had this sinking feeling. I couldn't move, so I just stood there. And I heard them all laughing. One of the wives said I actually don't mind her always asking questions. I think it's cute, and it made me feel hopeful that they will say something like, "Yeah, sure, we're just playing, we love that." But none of them did. Instead, the mom replied, "It's not cute. She's just stupid." After that they laughed again. I heard John laughing. My heart kind of broke at that moment because he didn't even say one positive thing. He didn't defend me. He just laughed. I quietly turned around and left the house. I texted John that I got sick and had to stay home. Now I'm wondering how I should approach this situation. We live together and I sleep in the guest bedroom for now, and I use the excuse that I don't want him to get sick from being around me. I can't ignore him forever and I can't pretend to be sick anymore, because it's been too long. I'm not sure how to proceed. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. I'm considering talking to them about this, but I'm also worried that they won't be honest with me. I can't marry him if he really thinks I'm stupid. But I also can't marry into a family who thinks so little of me. But maybe it was a joke, and I shouldn't take it so seriously. I'm so torn apart, and every day I convince myself a bit more that it's okay, and sometimes we should all laugh about ourselves. Now I feel like I'm just going crazy. I would really appreciate some advice. Update: a lot of people told me to break up with him and at the very least confront him, so that's what I decided to do. But before I did that, I texted the wife of John's brother, the one who said she liked me asking questions. I asked if we could meet up for coffee. She said sure. We met, and I didn't see the point in pretending to her that I didn't hear their conversation. So, after some small talk, I just said, "I heard you all talking about me during the barbecue." She immediately got sad and said she felt embarrassed. She explained that it wasn't a joke, wasn't out of context, that it was just mean and hurtful. She said she's sorry for not defending me more, but I said that it's okay and I understand. I told her that I don't blame her for anything, and just wanted to make sure that I understood the situation and see it for what it really was, and it really was laughing at me behind my back. Just bullying. At this point I just had to confront John. Some were saying that he will probably try gaslighting me. And they were right. We were having dinner together for the first time since the barbecue happened, because before I tried my best to avoid him. Yes, I know, not very mature of me, but I don't really have a strong support system. My family and best friends are hundreds of kilometers away. I only have 2 good friends here. I was so stressed I thought I'm going to pass out. My legs were shaking, and I was terrified because I knew deep down that this is the moment when my 5-year relationship goes down the drain. I looked him in the eyes and asked, "How does the sun work?" He looked confused, so I followed with, "Where should I put my fork? Why does nobody like me?" At this point realization hit him and he started nervously laughing. I said I was there, and I heard them. After the initial shock passed, he got mad. He said it's rude to eavesdrop. I said it's rude to bully people. He tried telling me that it was just a joke. That I shouldn't be so uptight. That it really was funny. I said that I didn't find it funny and went to the guest to calm down. He started panicking. He was asking me to please talk to him. He was much more apologetic and said that he will be 100% honest with me. I asked if his mother made similar comments before the barbecue. He said yes. I asked him if he ever defended me. He said he tries to. I don't know if I believe him. He told me he loves me and respects me. I don't know if I believe it either. I said that I love him too, but I need a break. He's all I have ever known. He was my first and only partner. I have no outside perspective of this. I have no experience. I need a moment to think. I will be going to my friend's house for a while to think everything through. The apartment has his name on the lease anyway. After I gathered some of my things and left, he kept texting me nonstop. He tried calling but I didn't respond. I was very hurt because he tried to belittle my feelings, and only later, when he realized that I might break up with him, started apologizing. The next day I decided to give him another chance to explain himself, and I came back to the apartment. He seemed very sad and tired. He said that he told his mother that I overheard them. I said I don't care. It's his time to step up and show me that he cares. I'm not interested in an apology from his mother. I'm already done with her. I can't put up with this behavior and mocking me like we're in primary school. My friend said that probably her ego is hurting. I think it's true. She never got the chance or never had the desire to have an education. She is a very good homemaker, but outside of that she doesn't have many interests of her own. If I'm asking her about making tomato soup, she will be talking for 30 minutes lecturing me about adding enough sugar, but not too much. She will lecture anyone who is willing to listen. But anytime someone is talking about something she's not familiar with, she gets defensive and tries to imply that nobody cares about that, and if it's not relevant to her, it shouldn't be discussed. Once again, he tried telling me that I should relax because it was only a joke, and at this point I had enough. I took off my ring and told him that his behavior is a joke, and I can't be the punchline. I told him that I wish him and his family the best and to look in the mirror to check if they really are as superior as they think they are. I said I'm going to be back with my friends soon to pick up the rest of my stuff and to not contact me again unless it's about moving my things out. And that's it. I'm done. I know I deserve better. I can't be with someone who can't stand up for me, and I wouldn't be able to feel comfortable around his family, so I'm done with the relationship. I hope they will treat his next girlfriend better.
My fiancé kicked me out of her house after I told her to set boundaries to her nightmare family. Now she's begging me to come back because she's miserably stuck with him forever. My fiancé and I are trying to plan out a wedding for roughly fall next year. Her childhood was terrible and abusive, to put it mildly. Her parents were raging narcissists, and she was the scapegoat for her 2 brothers. She was abused and thrown out the moment she turned 18. She was, however, a great student and hard worker, so with some scholarships and a part-time job, She has a great career and is pretty independent. The problem though, is that she still had contact with her family. They're rude, smug, and generally enjoy being a nuisance. And my fiancé can't say no, no matter the horrible things they say or how they outright try and intimidate her openly. They come over to our house more often. They make messes everywhere. Her mother acts like she's the effing stepmother from Cinderella. Her dad drinks all my effing beer and empties half the fridge. Her brothers stop by occasionally to act as mouthpieces for their parents. They practically trash the place and leave us to clean the mess. And where is my fiancé in all this? Quietly standing in the corner, practically shaking. I'm no fool here. There is legitimate trauma. She needs to feel loved by them and hope they will appreciate her. I've tried to establish boundaries. For nearly 2 years, I've been trying to push these ass clowns away. But this is the house she purchased, and no matter of financial contributions or otherwise, will she let me have a say on who comes into her house? She's been beaten down mentally and emotionally by them for so long. She has told me recently that she wants to earn their approval on how they were right about her, how she needs to be better for them. I've had too many emotional conversations with tears and begging to count, hoping she will take the steps to improve. But she's an adult. I can't force her to do anything. I love her, but I can't help but feel resentful of what she's doing. It's agonizing watching someone you love, someone who you know deserves so much better, openly destroy themselves for people like her family. It's been painful watching her cry herself to sleep one too many nights because of them. I've tried too many times to help her get out of their clutches, but I have to think of the future. This is the in-law family from hell, and I won't be able to avoid them. Tomorrow, I will tell her how I want to delay the wedding until firm boundaries are established. If she resents, I walk. I can't do it anymore. I refuse to watch a slow death like this any longer. Update: I had decided that I was going to have a heart-to-heart with my fiancé about her family. Essentially, I told her how this arrangement was not sustainable. I did not feel comfortable marrying her due to how much involvement her family has in her life, and I certainly did not feel comfortable bringing a child into this world with them. I didn't want to tell her cold turkey, no contact with them, but strict limitations to start with on them coming over and what they can do around the house. I also requested couples therapy before marriage. She wasn't happy. She stared angrily at me while I spoke, then started yelling at me when I finished. She told me I didn't understand their dynamic, which worked for her. She told me she had to work harder for them to appreciate her. I yelled at her that a parent's child shouldn't have to beg and plead and work for them to be loved. I finally told her that she sets limits with them or I walk. She was livid, and I was kicked out since I lived in her house. So, for the past few days, I have been staying in a hotel and have had my stuff taken out and put into storage. And frankly, it's been great. I will stay with family for a few weeks around mid-July. After that, I will go house searching for myself. Yesterday, however, things came to a head. We have had no contact since she booted me out, but I know every Saturday, her family loves to spend the afternoon over, and she uses me as a shield from their abuse. However, in a very petty move, I kept my phone muted all day and played Disco Elysium. I knew she would call back for help with her family, and at this point, pure resentment was kicking in for her, and I wanted nothing to do with her issues. By the night's end, she had sent me over a dozen texts and finally 2 frantic voicemails begging me to come home. I decided to come over to check up on her. Long story short, she was sobbing in the living room, and when I came to talk to her, she was practically crushing my back, hugging me, and sobbing. I gave her time to cool off and asked what happened. Long story short, her parents and brother came by to gift money from her and say horrible poop to her. She wanted to have me come over to help, but I was ignoring her, and when she tried to have one of her friends help out, and everyone said, F that, it all started clicking in for her. She kicked her family out, but not before they told some utterly vile poop to her I won't repeat. She kept apologizing to me and told me repeatedly to come home. I told her plainly that I had started to build up heavy resentment towards her for some time, and while I loved her and understood it was trauma and not her being outright abusive, there were major issues that would need to be addressed if we were to move forward. 1. She sells the house and moves. We make roughly the same amount of money and will buy a house together. Her family will never step foot in it. They will never come over. I will treat them in a very threatening manner if they try and come in. 2. We will go LC with her family right now, but make no mistake, we are working towards full NC on her end. She has accepted, but some will take a while to see through. I will stay in the hotel until I head back to stay with my family. She is welcome to come over, but I have clarified that her house is not where I want to go. She and I are off tomorrow, so we will spend the day here and maybe go out. Update 2. The other night, she was very vague about texting when she was originally supposed to come over. She came much later than expected, and I knew something was up. She unloaded on me how I was abusive, controlling, overly demanding, and unsupportive. It took me 5 seconds to figure out she was repeating some sort of rehearsed speech from her parents verbatim. And to be honest, I was so agitated at this point that I decided to be a prick about it despite making a huge gamble on her. I asked her if her family told her to say this. She said they suggested it to her, but she came up with it herself. Sure. I asked her to explain in detail what I did. She said I was living like a parasite to her. I reminded her that I'm paying 50-50 for her effing mortgage, and 50-50 for utilities and groceries. I have my own car I pay for, a job that makes just about as much as hers, unlike her effing leech parents who demand payments on the weekly and raid the kitchen on the weekends. I told her to try something better again. She looked flustered and said I was trying to isolate her. I kind of smirked like a jackass and told her that I have always supported her many friendships that she has destroyed on her own because no one wants to deal with her family or be used as a shield like me. I was practically demanding to know at this point why she was so hellbent on destroying her life for these people. She just kind of shouted that I don't understand her family, and she's just trying to earn their love back and was ranting at that point. It's just so staggering to see up close. It hit me like a truck, honestly, the realization. I did feel like a fool for trying, even if it was what I was supposed to do in the first place. She was practically berserk at this point, and I was just mentally exhausted and needed her to leave before someone called the police. She finally left, but I had a few concerned neighbors check on me. Some of her friends are aware and have messaged me to check on the situation. I told them the truth and that I just needed to be alone to think about what to do next. They revealed that she had given them similar rants after they expressed concern for her. One had even heard that she may risk losing her job. She is having some sort of mental break. From my understanding, she is now completely isolated. She is sprinting into a horrible, lonely life right now. There's nothing I can do for her at this point, and as selfish as it sounds, I'm just glad it will be behind me. Update 3. Things have wrapped up, but there were some loose ends. I completely forgot to change my mailing address, which I should have done ASAP, so some important things got sent to her house. Thankfully, she was at least cooperative in letting me get my stuff, and it wasn't much of an issue. Everything else was, though. She had a lot of nasty things to say, telling me she was already sleeping around, telling me how happy she was now that I was gone, telling me she's finally free of me, how she will be so much better off without me. There are a lot of generic insults and horrible things you would commonly expect from a nasty breakup. And you know what? It was so obvious it was a rehearsed script from her family. And you could easily see how miserable she was. She looked like a mess, as if she hadn't slept in days. The house was a mess. She wasn't even yelling it. She sounded so exhausted and broken when she said it. She didn't even smile when she said anything. Just a face contorted in hate and anger. She was not the woman I knew anymore. That person was gone. When I was getting ready to leave, she was still going on. I was fed up and told her something like, "Congratulations. Your friends are gone. Your human shields are gone. Your engagement is over. Your support is gone. Anyone who ever treated you like a decent human being is gone. It's just you and your family. I hope you're happy while they bleed you dry." It probably didn't go like that, but something like it. She just stood there. She stood there, looked at me indifferently, and walked away as I walked out the door. As we left, my mutual friend Tiffany asked if I was okay. I reassured her I was just trying to set myself up to go home next week. She also confirmed that she heard my ex lost her job for not showing up for several days and ghosting them. They will try an intervention next week and asked if I could participate. But I'm not delaying my travel because I just want a clean break. I know that if I stay involved, I will only witness the slow descent to either a full break or a suicide. I just can't do that. Despite all this, I'm excited for the future and have realized that I ignored too many red flags initially. Even with everything that happened, I know I'll be doing well and alright. My father demands that I give my half-brother a job and a piece of the land I inherited from my grandfather after he abandoned me. They tried to attack me, but they all ended up on the floor. My dad and his siblings hated my grandfather for good reasons. Growing up, their dad was an abusive alcoholic towards them and my grandmother. When she died, my dad and his siblings all left home when they turned 18 and never returned. Except for my dad, none of them ever spoke to him again. My dad spoke to my grandfather twice after leaving home. I was 8, at my mom's funeral, when I first met my grandfather. He approached me, kneeled on the ground in front of me, and introduced himself, asked how I was doing. But before I could say anything, my dad had pulled me away from him. He yelled for a bit, then dragged me away. I was 11 when I met him again. When my dad dropped me off at his house and left me there. A few years later, I discovered it was because my dad's new wife didn't want me around. You might think my dad was a pos for doing that. I know I did, but it turned out to be the best thing he could have ever done for me, even if I hated him for it. My grandfather and I became very close. His alcohol-filled days were long behind him, and he taught me everything. He owned a lot of land. A lot of land. He taught me how to grow vegetables, farm, maintain the property and look after the land, care for the animals, and hunt, and pushed me to get an education. I was happiest when he and I were working the land together. During all that time out on the land, working on one project or another, he told me of his life and what he had done to his family. He didn't make excuses, didn't try to reason away his behavior. He told me of all the hurt and pain he caused. When I asked why he didn't try reconciling with his children, he said they can't forget what he put them through. He understood that and accepted it. I was 26 when he died. I called my dad to let him know. I had to tell him who I was. He didn't stay on the line long, told me to take care of the funeral, then hung up. Knowing what I knew of his childhood, I didn't blame him, but he didn't even ask how I was. The resentment I already had for him grew. After the funeral, a young woman introduced herself to me at the wake. She was my cousin. I knew my dad had siblings, but that's all I knew. I had never met them, didn't know anything about them, so I didn't call any of them to let them know about my grandfather. I asked how she knew, and she told me my dad had called her mom. She spent a few days in town after the funeral, and we kept in touch after. We became, and still are, really close. A couple of years later, when she said she was moving into town, I gave her an acre of land. She, her husband, and their kids still live there today. My grandfather left me everything. None of my dad and his siblings contested the will. My cousin told me her mom didn't want anything, not 1 cent, from her father. I guess the rest of them felt that way because neither I nor my lawyer ever heard anything from them. Until last week, my dad called me. His son needs a new start. Apparently he wants to move my way to help with my businesses. I have a few small businesses I run off my property. A working farm where people can stay for a few days to experience farm life. I have a few money-making ventures. Now my half-brother, whom I'd met just one time before I was shipped off to my grandfather, all of a sudden wants to help me. I have all the help I need. I don't need his. I told my dad I would think about it. He's been sending me texts every day, several times a day, asking me about the property and the businesses, suggesting roles his son could fill, telling me that the family looks out for each other and sticks together, telling me my grandfather owes him, telling me what land I should give his son to set him up, and what land would be best for him and his wife when they visit. Whenever I see dad pop up on my screen, I want to smash my phone. My anger and resentment are directed at my dad, not his son, but I still don't want him here. He's a stranger to me. All my grandfather left me is mine now, and I don't owe any of them anything. My cousin and her husband are on my side and say if it were up to them, they would tell my dad and his son to get lost because they have never made an effort to be family with me, or even call to say hi. I know they're right. What they say is true. Update. I asked a close friend, a local cop, if he could find out if my dad still lived in the same place. Then I asked how to go about getting a trespass order. That was pretty simple. I left the police station with one in my hand and my dad's address. I then asked another close friend if he would accompany me to my dad's house, because as far as I knew, that was where my half-brother lived. We set off to see my half-brother. It took us about 10 hours to drive there. I decided to drive instead of fly because I needed that time to order my thoughts. We showed up unannounced. We could hear a woman screaming inside from the curbside. She was not screaming like she was in trouble. She was screaming at someone. My friend told me to pull my phone out and start recording. I'm glad he thought of that. Dad answered the door. He thought we were Jehovah's Witnesses, told us to F off, and tried to close the door in our faces. My friend put his hand on the door to stop him. I said, "Dad," and he took a second, then a third look. I cannot explain the change that came over him when he realized it was me. His whole demeanor went from "Who TF are you to dare come to my door" to "Ka-ching." He invited us in, then ran out of sight. The yelling stopped quickly, and he returned with his wife a minute later. She was all smiles. Big smiles with a big welcoming hug. The smile made my skin crawl, and the hug made me wish for plenty of soap and hot water. They told us to sit and asked if we wanted anything. Coffee, Pepsi, juice. I wanted water because my mouth and throat were suddenly dry, but we declined their offer of refreshments. We sat for a few minutes, making small talk, and then I asked where my brother was. Dad's wife turned her head and ordered someone standing out of sight to call your brother. I wasn't prepared for more than one brother, and I was not prepared for a sister. My friend could see I was struggling, so he asked questions about my half-brother. What does he do? Does he live close by? Oh, he lives at home? What work experience does he have? Has he worked with beef cows? Dairy cows? Are there any farm animals? Does he have any farm experience at all? What kind of work experience does he have? You see, there was a reason I asked this particular friend to accompany me and a reason he was asking those questions. Less than a half hour later, two guys walk in. They were obviously brothers. I did not get good vibes from them at all. The younger one walked around the corner, and we could hear him telling the sister that he was hungry and to make him something to eat, a sandwich for sake. The older one came in and sat next to his mother. He lounged in his seat like it was a throne and he was the king. Judging by the look on his mother's face, he was raised to believe that. He looked at my friend, dismissed him, then at me and smirked. He said, "So you're the beach that's going to set me up." He stated that like it was already a done deal. I said, "Not me." I looked at my friend, and he said no, that he was not taking him on. 2 or 3 seconds passed before Dad's wife asked what we meant. I told them I had no positions available and wasn't taking any new employees, but my friend was looking for farmhands. He then said he was no longer looking here. She then asked what about the land? My friend said the job came with a 2-bedroom cottage at reduced rent, but the role was no longer available. Then everything exploded. There were accusations of lording it over them, being a stuck-up bee, thinking I was better than them, that I owed them, that I was a greedy gold digger, that I was probably spreading my legs for the old man before he died, that they always knew I was defective. My dad's wife tried to attack me, but I held my arm up, caught her face in my hand, and shoved her back. She flipped backward over the arm of the couch. My dad then tried to attack me, and my friend got between us, gut punched him, and he ended up on the floor. Then, my spoiled half-brother tried to defend his dad by attacking my friend and got a punch to the jaw for his effort. He, too, ended up on the floor. I pulled out the trespass order, dropped it beside my dad, told him what it was, and then made our way to the door. On our way out, we saw the other brother standing there in shock, but he barely registered. I was too busy staring at my sister. She was beautiful but had scratches on her face and a swollen lip. We were supposed to drive straight home. That was the plan, but I couldn't leave. I couldn't, and my friend wouldn't leave me there alone. We got a hotel and spent 2 days watching my dad's house. I finally saw my sister leave and followed her to a grocery store. I waited outside for her to come out. She freaked when she saw me. She told me I had to leave and return to my farm and that her brothers were discussing what they would do to me if they got the chance. I said they didn't worry me. I approached her slowly like she was one of the rescues in my stables. I spoke calmly, hands at my sides but in full view, no sudden movements. I spoke to her for several minutes about the property, what we do there, what we offer. I asked if she had a phone, then gave her my number, told her she could call me, text me anytime, day or night, and I'd answer. I backed off then. I told her I'd wait for her call. She texted me on our long drive home and asked if I had any dogs. It's been roughly a week since. She texts me every day, several times a day. She's called me at 2 a.m. last night. We talked for an hour about the dogs, and at the end of the call, she told me she would be 18 in May. She wants to ask if she can come here when she can legally leave her parents. I will pick her up myself on the day of her birthday if that's what she wants. My girlfriend is planning to move in with me with her 4 children, but she told me that she doesn't like my daughter as the queen of the house, so I kicked her to the curb. My daughter Stacy has one of the 2 rooms in my house with an ensuite bathroom. It's a largish room with a nice bay window, obviously very nice. I've recently become engaged to my girlfriend of 3 years, Alice, and her landlord has recently hiked her rent, so we're planning to have her move in with me. She has some kids. She has 2 daughters and 2 sons. She is also pregnant, and our daughter is due in about 5 months. I've made it absolutely clear to my daughter, as a condition of getting her approval on moving my girlfriend in, that she is allowed to keep her room, and she is also allowed to have a full lock on her door. My daughter plans to go to school locally, and I have told her in no uncertain terms that she's welcome to live at home for the rest of my life, and after that, she can inherit the house. I bought the house with her mother and paid it off in large part with her mother's life insurance 10 years ago, so it only seems fair. She says she's alright as long as she has her room and bathroom and is allowed to put a lock on her door. Stacy will be giving up a room she's currently using as a studio/project space. She does art, videos, voiceovers, etc. So even her larger room will become a bit more cramped, and she'll definitely need the extra space she has. There will be a bedroom for Alice's girls, Stacy's old project room, and Alice's boys, who will be getting an old room. I will be putting in a finished nursery/bedroom in the basement for our new daughter. Alice thinks that this is unfair. She thinks it was wrong of me to decide without her, and she also thinks that she should move her two daughters into Stacy's room and that Stacy should have to move to the smaller room they'll be getting. The two of them already share a smaller room than the one I'm moving them into, so they are getting an upgrade regardless. Alice thinks that it's not fair for Stacy to have a bathroom all day herself and that there won't be enough bathrooms for everyone else. She also disapproves of Stacy being able to lock everyone out. There were other smaller things she didn't like that I agreed to with Stacy, like the fact that she is to be paid for any babysitting or that my older car, her mom's old car, is hers when she gets her driver's license. We'll have our own bathroom in the master bedroom, and the house has 3 other bathrooms besides, one on each floor, one near what will be her girls' room, one not far from what will be the boys' room, and one little basically be directly next to the newly finished room. I told Alice that my deal with Stacy is non-negotiable, set in stone, and that it's literally a condition of her even moving in. Alice is upset that Stacy and I have spaces completely dedicated to ourselves. I have my office, which I need because I work from home and have projects besides, and there aren't many other spaces to put people. I told her she could pretty much do what she wanted in the living room, but that it is what it was, and there was pretty much nothing to be done about it. A bigger house is not an option unless Alice is going to start making a hell of a lot more money and buy her own bigger house. It's already a pretty big house, and housing is expensive. I told her that she was already getting a break by my only expecting her to contribute 15 or 20% to household bills. If we were doing it proportionately, it would be more like 25 to 30%. We keep separate finances, and we've agreed to a prenup. Alice just seems upset that I won't change the setup even though there's no real way to change it, and she's accused me of treating Stacy like a spoiled little princess and letting her be queen of the house. Frankly, my daughter comes first. She's lived here all her life, and I already know it will be a big adjustment having all these other kids move in. As much as I love Alice and as much as I want our relationship to work out, if it's a matter of choosing between the two of them, then my relationship with Alice is a sacrifice I'm willing to make. I've told her that if she comes into this with wicked stepmother vibes, and that'll be the end of things. She thinks I'm being unreasonable. Update: it was Friday, and Stacy texted me, asking for her allowance. I was with Alice then, and I went ahead and let the subject come up. I give Stacy $100 a week. Alice thinks that this is crazy and excessive. She thinks it's improper and brought it up as an example of how she thinks I'm raising Stacy like a spoiled princess. She said as much again when I told her I was sending Stacy her allowance, but this time, Alice also asked if her kids would get the same allowance after we get married. I told her that someday our new daughter would probably get an allowance just like Stacy does, but that there was no way I had any plans of shelling out an extra $400 a week for her other kids. Alice got upset. She said that Stacy wasted my money on shoes and makeup. She has previously criticized Stacy for wearing fancy sneakers, high heels, and makeup, and she said that I was showing favoritism and that that is a form of abuse. She complained about me letting Stacy buy things with my credit card and store my credit card on her phone when I didn't even let Alice do that. She said that whatever money would go to the kids should be split evenly amongst them. When I shrugged and told her that that wasn't going to happen and that I wasn't going to cut Stacy's allowance, she snapped at me. She said that a man living alone with his daughter and doting on her like I do is creepy and incestuous. And she said you've just replaced your dead wife with your daughter, and you need to stop. That was it. Sure, I've ignored many red flags until now, but that was it. She started trying to tell me about how it was unhealthy for me to be so close with Stacy, how she didn't want her kids to be neglected, and how she wanted to be treated as an equal if we were getting married. Still, I interrupted her, and I told her that I didn't think we should be getting married. I told her that I didn't want her moving in and that we would need to work something else out. To be perfectly honest, my sister, my brother, and some of my friends have expressed some of the same misgivings about Alice that I've read, although they were generally much more gentle about it. I was in love with her. In fact, I'm still in love with her, and I wasn't seeing things clearly. I told her that I would always make sure that our child had a roof over her head, but that she was going to have to work something out for herself and her kids on her own. Obviously, we had a huge fight. She screamed at me. She called me a heartless bastard. She blamed Stacy for trying to sabotage our relationship. She guilt-tripped me about her cost of living and how I was in an empty house all by myself. She also guilt-tripped me about the stress on the baby, and I actually do feel bad and worry about that. She eventually broke down crying and told me to leave. In the past 10 years, this was my first relationship with a woman that became serious. I love her, and this hurts. It hurts a hell of a lot. I told Stacy that she didn't have to bother moving her stuff out of the other room and that Alice wasn't coming, and we hugged. She asked if this was her fault, and I told her no. I told her I honestly feel like marrying Alice would have been a mistake even if the two of them could have been best buddies. I always wanted to have a few more kids and missed having a wife, but things don't always happen the way we want. So I'm pretty sure my relationship with Alice is effectively over, even if we're raising a child together for the foreseeable future. I'm not sorry to be having another kid, even if I really wish the circumstances could be better. The red flags were always there. I guess it's better that I notice them now instead of later.